Doktorka Ulrike Lin z Technické univerzity v Chemnitzu nám přiblížila výzkum gest, na kterém se podílí. Could you introduce us the gesture research?
Well, gesture research has a long line of history. Actually, it started in the antique world already, but mainly it got very popular in the 70s, and right now it evolved into a separate and pretty big research topic, which I cannot put into a couple of sentences, but let's say it started in the 70s and it's going on right now pretty well.
Why is it useful to study gestures?
Well, first of all, it's not only useful to communicate in everyday life, it is not only useful to communicate within different cultures. It makes it possible, but it also makes it complicated because gestures are not always the same in different cultures. But mainly it is very useful to combine gestures and language and integrate gestures, especially gestures that accompany speech, gestures that occur while I'm speaking, to integrate it into the grammar of a language makes perfect sense because the language is not only composed by words but also by different aspects of nonverbal communication.
What is your current research topic, and could you describe it in detail?
In detail. I don't think we have the time for detail, but I can scratch a little bit around it. I am working on the Technical University of Chemnitz in the field of German linguistics and gesture science, and we are working on a project that has been financed by the BMBF, and we are trying to find out cognitive models of gestural language. Let's say we are interviewing and working with different types of movements, hand movements and objects. We're trying to figure out how the hands build objects, how objects build the hands or special hand movements, how they influence each other, how it relates to robots, robotic science, and the future, because especially gesture research will be quite big in the next couple years.
Are there any specifics in using gestures in Central Europe?
I don't think any more specifics than in every other country, culture, or even subculture.
You've written some books about gesture research. One of them is about Anglo-American gestures. Is there a difference between them and the ones we use in Europe or in Central Europe?
Not as much as you would think. There are some differences. I have been working with emblematic gestures, which are gestures that are quite common and conventionalized within a certain culture. That was the culture I've been working with, and quite surprisingly, almost all the gestures also occur in Europe, but that was more a cultural coincidence. I don't think that is possible with cultures like Africa or Asian cultures. So no, not much of a difference. Some gestures, yes, but not all of them.
Another one of your books deals with gestures used by non-human primates. How different are they to the gestures that humans use?
Yeah, you can't really compare the two. Primates don't really use gestures as in the way we define gestures in gesture science. It is more like an action that does communicate and also means to communicate, but is more based on what Roland Posner would say the basis action, which then later evolves into a gesture with communicative intent. So even though the primates do communicate by, let's say, opening their hand, begging or asking for food, it is not the same than how we would use this gesture, because humans then already abstract the need of asking for food into cognitive processes that can be metaphorically understood and interpreted.
Na poslední otázku jsme si přivzali k paní Lin i pana Poznera. Are there any intercultural differences in gestures?
Like this? Yes, there are. And the first thing which is important in that connection is that cultures are not necessarily institutions that have the same borders as oral communication. So the language culture and the gestural culture need not coincide. And one of the examples concerning that is the saying yes or no with various movements of the head. Another one is also beckoning somebody or making somebody go away. Now, in the Balkan Wars, you had a number of situations where there were people from the southern Mediterranean that came together with people from northern Europe. And at that time, they did not all know their mutual gestures. So when you had a police officer sitting in his little house at the border, and there was a car coming, the policeman could say, or could want to say, come here. And what they did normally was coming here. A Northern European would understand that differently. And it's very interesting for theoreticians of semiotics and of gesture, how gestures can be so similar and at the same time different. So the answer here in this case is that when you do it this way, you somehow give a bigger emphasis on this. This produced by one person from the north of Europe would mean nothing, because the persons in northern Europe would do it this way. This means come. But for somebody like the policeman, this could mean come. And the person from northern Europe would think that this means go away. So if there is a car, passenger car, and the policeman, and they understand this in this different way, the policeman could think that the car was trying to flee. And there were reports about policemen shooting cars where the car drivers misunderstood this. And it's a very simple difference. It's a simple difference of emphasis on this part of the movement versus this part of the movement, where always the other part of the movement had no meaning except for trying to get the hand in the right position again. That's an example.
Okay, thank you very much. Or do you want to answer that as well?
You can answer the head.
Well, I just wanted to give another example, if possible. In Germany, in Europe, I think not all in Europe, but mostly we say yes and nod our heads, and we say no and shake the head. That is not always the same in all the cultures. For example, Bulgaria, they say yes and no, which is even hard for me to do, because it doesn't feel like it should. So if I am there and I say yes and somebody thinks I mean no, which is a very easy example, that is something to be aware of and watch out in different cultures. Also the handshake, for example. Mostly we think that the handshake is a polite and useful way to say hello and goodbye. That is not always the case. Sometimes shaking somebody's hand could be intruding into their interpersonal space. It could be not good to do. And so it's really important to study that kind of behavior visiting different cultures. There's also a lot of differences.
Thank you very much.